There are two groups which are two races that each inhabit a particular reality. This is not as strange as it may seem. Try talking to someone who holds an opposite view to your own. The language is not the same, the perceptions are not the same. Atheist and creationist both see what they think is the same world, and yet they cannot communicate because in fact they see two different realities. Often, we gloss over the conflict, but seeing a sunset as a result of radioactive decay or as a creation has immense implications we need to understand. The mission of the Radicalization Project, TRP, is to eliminate polarization, extremism, division, and hate by means of enhancements to specialization. This mission is incoherent if division is not a serious problem and/or is natural and cannot be eliminated. Radical social policy is policy created specifically to avoid conflict, which ultimately means the eradication of sites where parasites can access the wealth of a nation. The greatest source of division is a conflict over property rights. The source of these conflicts is parasites claiming title or rights to what they did not create and therefore have to right to. Extremists divide the institutions of man into three fields of study. Radicals consolidate politics, religion, and economics into a single institution with three facets. A priorix is the study of thought or how men think. Using this approach, radicals accept there are two ways of thinking or approaching the world as a subject of study. There are two primary frames of reference of thought fields. These are two ways of thinking about reality and what is truth. One field of reference is the liberal or extremist point of reference, which sees everything as a manifestation of the physical. Liberals view reality as composed of forces, but for every force there is an opposite and equal reaction. Physicality is composed of polar opposites struggling for supremacy. But the reality is this way of thinking about reality creates polarization, division, and a perpetuation of conflict. In an extremist frame of reference, there is no winning, for every action creates its own opposition. Radicals see reality as extremists do, but they see the extremist version of things as an artificially created contest between two conspirator groups who work together to divert attention from what is really going on. We know the extremists are co-conspirators because their rivalry is one of degrees. There is nothing fundamentally different between the left and the right. Yet, that being said, if we dig down deep enough, the true war can be discerned. In the extremist reality, both socialism and private enterprise require the state and individuals to operate the institutions of business. The difference is that socialism gives more power to the state and capitalism prefers a weaker state. But it only takes a few pieces of legislation to transform one into the other. The same people playing the same roles could remain in place. This fact demonstrates the left and right are in a mock battle. The left fights to bring in socialism and atheism, and they call this progress. The liberal right expresses outrage and dig in their heels, but get pulled along, nevertheless. Conservatism is acknowledged to be little more than an anchor slowing down the liberal ship, but it still manages to get pulled along by the tides of liberal change. But let's imagine conservatives score a win and reduce spending, increase the rule of private enterprise, and cut back on all of the social spending. At some point, these actions will cause a reaction. Conservatives can only reduce spending so far until they become nullified as a political force. Every action is the source of an equal and opposite reaction. It is easier to increase taxes and spending and harder to reduce the same. It is easier to increase the size of the bureaucracy than eliminate public sector jobs. The system always rushes up towards larger governments, higher taxes, and increased social policy and programs. Conservatives can only delay, hinder, and roll back these things so far before the process begins anew with a new liberal or socialist government. But under all of this fake competitiveness, there is something real and substantial. Radicalism opposes extremism and the false polarization that extremists manufacture to divert attention from the real struggle. The real battle is between the extremist ideologues and radicalism. It can be likened to the battle between liberals and conservatives or the left and right, but if we think the conflicts are identical, we will be co-conspirators in the scam. We, on the right, have to get beyond the illusion and embrace radicalism, which is a rejection of the extremist worldview. The key to understanding the message of the a priorian radicals is specialization, which is the key element in all progress and the development of all civilizations. Specialization produces no contest or conflict, as it is the embodiment of the golden rule. To do unto others as one would they do unto you is to customize our response to their needs, but it is also to do this without imposing costs onto them. No one wants to pay costs created by others or be charged with the crimes committed by others. So we must cover our own costs with our actions. This is the key to the understanding of radicalism. Radicalism is conceptual absolutism. It is a position without compromise. One could conceive of radicalism and perfection of accomplishment. Radicalism also implies a rejection of the conventional. If we tie convention and extremism together, radicals unequivocally reject the extremist way of thinking. Radicals are not caught up the false struggles of the political and economic right and left. We abjure extremist language and policy. In practice, radicals cannot and will not lend their support to either the private or public ownership model. Nor are we capitalist or communist. Our project contains our political policy. The radical mission is to eliminate all extremism along with division and conflict. We do this primarily through the elimination of parasitism by means of specialization. Yet, there is a great divide between extremists and radicals, and it is unbridgeable. The differences are unreconcilable. But the radical program is about enhancing specialization, not gaining incremental graduated advances. As if analog modifications would bring about digital changes. The Radicalization Project is our party and our business model, which does works of faith in the service of Christ. Radicalization builds the church and the economy. Wealth does not accrue to individuals, but to the body of Christ. The Radicalization Project removes the animosity from between persons so the body can work in security and peace. Projects are planted by 2 or 3 persons, up to 15, setting up a radical court to oversee the radicalization of a particular political jurisdiction or community. The project is capitalized with the tools of specialization. By eliminating the possibility of extremism and extremist infiltration, risk is removed. There is no threat of loss hanging over the project. It is the existence of liabilities that impose risk on investments. Eliminate the liability and the risk is negated. A liability is a contested claim on the same asset, but no one owns assets on earth because no one on earth created any asset. They were all created by God. Even if you prefer to reject the existence of God, you cannot claim you created any of the natural world, so you have no legitimate claim on anything of nature. You may be able to make the claim and enforce the claim by gun and force of arms, but you cannot prove you anything in nature, by logic or through moral argument. We own the value we add to assets. We own the equity we add to the physical world by means of work, but we do not add the thing worked on. If we all work the same way and produce the same things, our work adds little value. Adding value means you do something no one else can do or in a way no one else can duplicate. It is the uniqueness of each person that produces the tools and the products that make up civilization. It was the peoples and places that liberated men the most to follow their inclinations that produced the best and highest civilizations. This is the adoptions of the principles of radicalization. The Radicalization Project eliminates extremism because extremists polarize peoples and hinders the development of individual differences. Extremism turns us into intersectional identities rather than individuals. Instead of a person with a unique skill, we become part of a color or gender group condemned to display our characteristic feature as a first priority and canceled in the strongest of terms if we break ranks in any degree. The individual matters. It is the individual who produces all wealth. Even on a production line, the unique contribution by the individual worker is vital to the smooth operation of the line. It is this kind of cooperation that the Radicalization Project seeks to emulate. In setting up a project, specialization converge to establish even greater specialization. A group of plumbers converge to form a project in which some focus on one area or / and type of plumbing and others specialize in a different kind of way. Someone is hired to assign jobs and keep the accounts, and perhaps arrangements are made with other trades to flesh out the size of the projects that can be undertaken. Projects are organized around the mission of the Radicalization Project, which is to eradicate extremism in all its forms and manifestations using the power of specialization. The project always seeks for new and better ways to specialize. To track progress, a unit of account is activated. This is a unit of value created to track the equity added to the project. This unit of account is based on and a measure of the equity created. An accounting equity is issued as preferred shares. When utilized as a unit of account, preferred shares is contracted to prefers and designated by the symbol. All work done is paid for by the use of prefers, and all purchases made within the project is paid for using prefers. This advances the rate of specialization in the project. Regardless, the mission of the project and its members to advance specialization and fully and as rapidly as is possible, and this in turn advances the uptake and development of civilization.